What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into TTP Sports, and we're going to be doing a little bit of a Flyers check-in, I guess, if you could say that is the case. So, it's been a long time since we talked about the orange and the black. Granted, a lot of the holidays have passed, and the Flyers, they do their typical West Coast road trip with a lot of late games during the Christmas and the New Year holiday, so it's kind of difficult to talk about the team when they're playing so many late games in a row. And it was also because I went to Vegas for the game that was in Vegas the day after New Year's, and yeah, that game was not fun, just to say the least, watching the Flyers get smacked 5-2 by one of the better teams in the National Hockey League. And I guess I should have expected that at the end of the day, but when the team scores like 15, 20 seconds into the game, the Flyers, that is, I kind of expected, to be a little bit more of a fun night when that happens, but sadly, that was not the case at the end of the day. It sucked. And the Flyers finally came home. They played last night against the Toronto Maple Leafs. It was a bit of a home and home kind of situation there, where they played in Toronto on Sunday. They lost that game in overtime, and then they lost last night in regulation to Toronto, where the Flyers could have tied it up in the final minute if Owen Tippett hit the goddamn open net off of a beautiful pass from Matvei Michkov. So that was aggravating. And there's definitely a little bit of aggravating things with this Flyers team that we'll get into in this video. So it has to do with the front office. It has to do with the goaltending situation. There's just a lot of things, and a lot of, fans on social media are eating a lot of things up, from some quotes from a TSN interview with Danny Briere. So we'll get into all of that stuff. But before we do, thank you once again, everybody, for joining in. Welcome to TTP Sports. If you are new to the channel, haven't hit that subscribe button yet, viewed for a long time, I definitely recommend that you do hit that subscribe button. Does me a great deal of service with the YouTube algorithm. You can also drop a like. You can also leave a comment in the comment section down below. Like to interact with you guys down there. You can also use the code TTP Sports, $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek. Great deal. Do not pass it up. Get yourself down to any Flyers games, Sixers games, or if you could find a way to dwindle the price down of an Eagles playoff game at the link, especially for this upcoming Sunday's game against the Packers. We'll also get into some Packers-Eagles talk in the next few days as well. You can also leave a follow on Instagram and TikTok at TTP Sports for reels and shorts and all of that good stuff. So, Flyers, what have they been doing lately? Haven't been doing a lot. They kind of went 500. They went 2-2-1 on the West Coast road trip. They won in Anaheim. They lost against the Kings. They beat the San Jose Sharks. They lost to Vegas, and they lost to Toronto in overtime. So I guess you could call that a 500 road trip, I guess you could say, at the end of the day. And then you finally come back home after a very long time to play the Toronto Maple Leafs again, losing that in regulation. And once again, Sam Ersson, lower body injury, suffered that over the course of the West Coast road trip, so that forced Kolosov into the net more. That's forcing Ivan Fedotov finally back into the net after this man has not been playing hockey, basically, for a month. Now, that's not anything injury-related or anything like that. He's just been the third-string goaltender, and the Flyers, as we all know, have been carrying 3 goaltenders for months at this point, which is still very idiotic, because there's no reason that should be happening. Now, with Ersson's injuries, it's kind of forced their hand into that case. But when Ersson was healthy, there was really no point of having 3 goaltenders up, even though, Fedotov hasn't been anything spectacular whatsoever. He's been very subpar as well, as much as the entire Flyers goaltending system right now that has been playing this year. Not the prettiest thing in the world. It's kind of one of the biggest weak points of the team, regardless of the other things that this team lacks. But yeah, goaltending has definitely not been the prettiest. But I think Fedotov deserves to play more games over Alexei Kolosov at this point. Alexei Kolosov has basically just been proving that he does not belong in the NHL. He is nowhere near ready for the NHL. He needs to develop in Lehigh Valley. That is 100% clearly the case. And yes, granted, due to Ersson's injuries, he's been forced to play up here. But even with Ersson healthy at certain points, Kolosov is still the backup, and Fedotov is the third-string goaltender right from the mouth of John Tortorella. And you're keeping 3 goaltenders up, and then when you get into these situations, you have a goaltender that in Fedotov that hasn't played in a month. And when you're carrying 3 goaltenders cannot use the practice surface for ice. One is going to have to remain on the bench. So you're just in a very, very leaky and sticky situation there that you put yourselves in, because for some reason this team is insanely terrified of sending Alexei Kolosov down to the AHL. They're acting like as soon as you send him back down to Lehigh Valley, he's going to throw a temper tantrum and he's going to demand to go back to the KHL. Honestly, that could be happening because I have no idea of Alexei Kolosov's attitude. But Danny Briere should not be hogtied by a 23-year-old that is clearly not ready for the NHL. Honest to God, the way that he is playing so far could be even hurting him playing in the NHL this much. He has a save percentage, I believe, around .850. That's not good. And yes, Kolosov has shown some capabilities of maybe being a good goaltender in this league, but more times than not, he's not ready. He needs to play down in Lehigh Valley where he can get consistent starting time and develop down there. But no, you're allowing this kid to hogtie you and allow him to stay up in the NHL to where he just basically becomes Swiss cheese. Because there's a lot of goals that he allows that are just way too soft. And for an NHL caliber goaltender should not be allowing those type of goals. There was one goal that he allowed in the Vegas game where it just went right off of his glove and into the net, bounced right off it. The shot was going wide, and he touches it with his glove, goes right behind him in the back of the net. That just can't happen. It cannot happen. And yes, I'm not saying that Ersson doesn't allow weak goals, that Fedotov doesn't allow weak goals. Those two are more capable of playing NHL games more right now than Alexei Kolosov. Sam Ersson, even though I still don't believe he's a starting caliber goaltender in this league, he's probably more of a backup for the longevity of his career. He's still an NHL capable goaltender. Ivan Fedotov, yes, that's up in the air at this point, but I've seen more quality games from Fedotov lately, even though he just played the last 2 games against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he looked pretty fine, in my personal opinion. Granted, there's still some cases where he's playing a little too deep in the net for my liking, where he's allowing, just a wide gaping side of the net to be wide open for John Tavares to just shoot it right past him. But overall, I think Fedotov has put the team in the perfect spot the past 2 games against Toronto to allow them to stay in and allow them to try to win it, even though the Flyers didn't do it at the end of the day. But Kolosov just is not ready. He's not ready. He's not an NHL goaltender right now. And that's not saying he's going to be an NHL goaltender in the future. It's just he's a 23-year-old kid and is clearly showing signs of being overmatched, outclassed in every facet of the game. And you're just allowing him to go out there and completely, I don't know if it's losing confidence or anything like that. The bottom line is, the whole summary of this entire thing is, Kolosov should be in the AHL, and you shouldn't be allowing this kid to hogtie you. I don't know if it's just that they're getting scared of the whole Cutter Gauthier situation where a kid throws a temper tantrum when you do something he doesn't like and he's going to demand out of there, even though that would be very idiotic on Kolosov's part because I'm not sure an NHL team's going to want him with the numbers that he's putting up right now in the NHL, and especially with the way that he brings an attitude by going down to the American Hockey League. I don't think a team's going to want them, so there's really not going to be any chance that he gets traded. And I'm sure the Flyers are not going to love if he tries to demand himself going back to the KHL. So you've got to suck it up and play down in Lehigh Valley where you're going to be playing consistent time and getting consistent starting numbers and develop down there. You're not going to develop in the NHL. The NHL is not a development league. There's only a rare instance where guys that are just uber talented, they just come right to the NHL. Granted, the whole Carter Hart situation is very sticky. Carter Hart was an exception. Guys that come into the league, like Matvei Michkov, like Connor Bedard, like all these other superstars that are going to be growing into the league, those guys are exceptions. Goaltenders, it definitely is more of a sticky situation. And you should not be trying to develop yourself in the NHL. This kid's trying to tell, oh, I'm NHL ready, oh, I'm NHL ready. No, you're not. I look at his numbers right here. They're just not good whatsoever. A 3.45 goals against and an .870 save percentage. Now, granted, the other Flyers goaltenders' numbers are not even good either. Sam Ersson's numbers, 302 goals against and 884 save percentage. Fedotov's numbers, a 3.4 goals against and an 874 save percentage. They're still both better numbers than Kolosov's. So I think Fedotov and Ersson right now are fine, but yes, granted, Sam Erson's injured, so you really can't do anything at this point, but they're still refusing to put Sam Ersson on IR. So I have no idea what the direction they're going to be going with this goaltending in the near future. I just don't see it right now. It's just for this season. It's just they're playing this weird slippery slope thing that just really rubbing me the wrong way, in my personal opinion. So that's a whole, there's so many things with the Flyers right now that's rubbing a lot of people the wrong way. And the goaltending right now is just, it's kind of holding this team, even though this team's not good whatsoever. I'm not saying this team is a playoff contender. I'm not saying this team is a Stanley Cup contender whatsoever. Just imagine if they had quality goaltending that they had last year. They'd probably be in a much better spot. But who knows, maybe with the goaltending right now, and maybe that helps them to wind down the standings a little bit to where maybe they can get a higher pick in the NHL draft. Maybe they can get some lottery luck. Maybe that works to their benefit. I have no idea. But sometimes I would say this team has been getting a little bit more difficult to watch, I would say, on a daily basis. Especially, it doesn't help that Matvei Michkov kind of is hitting a wall now, even though yesterday was one of his best games in a while against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Could have had a billion points last night if players just learned how to finish on his passes, and that's been the same topic the entire season for Michkov. It really has been, because he has, 29 points right now? We've been saying that weeks ago that he could probably have even more assists if his teams just learn, if his teammates on his lines just learn how to bury the pucks. And the clear sign that there was 2 passes that he had last night to 2 different players. One, the Morgan Frost, where he should have just tapped it in, went over his stick, wasn't able to get the puck on the stick. And then the obviously gaping one was in the final minute of the game where the Flyers had a chance to tie it up against Toronto. Beautiful pass where the Flyers have the extra attacker out there on the ice. Beautiful pass down low behind the red line from Michkov across the crease to Owen Tippett, where he has the biggest open net of the fucking world. The goaltender's not even in position to make the save. All Owen Tippett has to do is just put the puck in the net. What does he do? He doesn't even miss the net high. He shoots it like wide right. Doesn't even miss the net high. Like that I can understand. You're completely missing the net. Why? Like, what are you even aiming at? That's just unacceptable. And that comes to the fact that you also extended Owen Tippett for 8 years. And you need your guys that are, extended to 8 years and making more money to hit those shots. And Owen Tippett has to hit those shots. And that comes to the question, well, not the question, it comes to the fact that Matvei Michkov would probably have more production if his teammates finished. Now, I'm not saying Matvei Michkov has been perfect lately. No, he's definitely hit a lull at some point, which was most likely to be expected, but it also kind of doesn't help when his ice time is varied throughout the game. I did see like a stat that showed when the Flyers are leading in games, his ice time is like below 3 minutes. When the game is tied, it's, a little bit raised from that standpoint. And when the Flyers are trailing, he's on the ice the entire situation. So I'm seeing Michkov play the entirety of the power play, which is probably the best thing because the Flyers power play sucks, and Michkov is probably the only reason that the power play can even generate anything. But that's also besides the point. But it's just clear and evident that Michkov, and like I said, he's not playing his best hockey lately. Yesterday was his best game in a little bit. But it's also clear and evident that this team still needs so many more pieces surrounding Matvei Michkov. Because if you had players to the talent, or even close to the talent of Michkov, they probably bury that shot that he passed. Probably a lot of these passes that he's making this season, if you had better quality players surrounding him, they'd probably finish a lot more. Not with Morgan Frost's, not with, Owen Tippett's. I'm not saying Tippett's a bad player. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I think Tippett is a good player, but it's clearly there's just 2 completely different levels between him and Matvei Michkov. Same thing with a guy like Tyson Forrester and all that stuff. Really, the only better player on the team that should be playing with Michkov is Travis Konecny, and I have no idea why John Tortorella doesn't put Michkov with Konecny even further. I even questioned why wasn't Michkov on the line with Konecny in the 3-on-3 overtime against Toronto. I believe it was Tippett and Konecny, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm not sure what the line combinations are. They're just getting weirder and weirder as the games go along. Sometimes you're seeing Ryan Poehling on the first line. You're seeing Scott Laughton on the second line. You're seeing Coots pushed down to the third, fourth line. Like, really, the most consistent line that I've been seeing game after game after game is Noah Cates, Tyson Forster, and Bobby Brink. And those guys have been playing fantastic at their own rate. It's been the Flyers' best line for the past few weeks. But if you want to get Michkov going, play him with the best players on the team. Play him with Konechny. Play him with someone else. Play him with someone that's going to finish. Because Travis Konechny, he's got 45 points this year. He's above point per game. He's most likely going to have another 30-goal season at this rate. You got to play him with Konechny. You play Michkov with Konechny. Konechny probably has more points than he has right now. You play Konechny with Michkov. Michkov probably has more points than he has right now. It's just, I know you're trying to slowly do this thing with Michkov. You're trying to learn certain aspects of his game. Personally, I know he's trying things that things that can't work in the NHL, things that will work in the NHL. I know he's trying every single game, and I'm not blaming him for that whatsoever. I'm not putting any blame on Matvei Michkov. I just wish the Flyers allowed him to take more risks. I feel like he's a little scared to take those risks, especially with Torts, even though there was an article that came out, I believe, in Russian the other day that talked about how Michkov really respects John Tortorella and he's really appreciated what John Tortorella has done. So I don't think there's any animosity between Torts and Michkov. I don't think that whatsoever. But I just think right now I just wish they let him take more risks. I just don't think there's really allowing him to take any risks. I really just don't see that right now, especially with the way that it reflects on his ice time. That's just what I see personally. And even going to with the way this team has been operating, there was a quote or an interview with Danny Briere the other day. I believe it was on TSN, where he's talking about where the team is right now and how he perceives the team, going in the next few years, talking about Matvei Michkov, blah, 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 players on the team right now, how they're going to operate and making moves and all that stuff. Especially the one quote that Danny Briere always brings up in every single interview when it revolves around the rebuild and talking about how difficult it is to get out from below the standings and how difficult it is when you're a team that is tanking. If you're one of the teams that is tanking, it's really difficult to get out of that position, to get into a position where you're competitive and competing for a Stanley Cup. Yeah, there is truth to that, but there's also an argument that you can say the Flyers have been pretty much in hockey purgatory for a little bit at this point. They rarely have been in the bottom of the standings. As much as we love that they have Matvei Michkov, that was luck. That was luck that Matvei Michkov fell to them. And then when you go last season, in that draft, you trade back, you're still in the middle basically of the first round, and you draft a guy that is perceived to be a reach at that stage in the first round. And granted, there is still things about Jet Luchenko. He was the best player on Team Canada at the World Juniors. Granted, he was only playing the fourth line. Maybe that's more assessed to the Team Canada's coaching staff because Team Canada just got fucking embarrassed in the World Juniors, which was absolutely hilarious. But it's just, you're not putting yourselves in good... And granted, you do have 3 draft picks in the first round this year. You have 3 draft picks in the second round this year. I don't expect the Flyers to make all those picks. Will they utilize those in trades? I have no idea. But when you're talking about this team in the rebuild right now, Danny Briere is like 18, 19 months into the job. I'm not going to harp on him that badly like some other Flyers fans do, because there's a very big section of Flyers fans that really don't like Danny Briere and think he's doing a terrible job. I'm also not in the standpoint where people are overpraising Briere and think he's doing an amazing job and blah, 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 blah. I'm not at that point. I am critical when criticism needs to happen. I praise when praise is worthy. And yes, there really hasn't been that much to praise about Danny Briere. There's been a few moves. There really has been, a lot of things left to be desired. Really, his last big move was, if you want to call it quote-unquote big, was the Sean Walker trade last deadline, where he got the first-round pick for. There really hasn't been anything big since. Really not much in the offseason. Yeah, you signed Owen Tippett. You extended Travis Konechny. And that was it. It was just bringing over Matvei Michkov. He really didn't do anything else. Now, granted, I wasn't expecting this team to solve everything in a year. That's kind of really asinine at this point. I just want to see how this team is going to progress in this rebuild. what they're going to do with the trade deadline, what they're going to do in the offseason, because eventually, if you're just going back and forth with the same roster again next year, you're going to be losing a lot of Flyers fans. And I think Flyers fans at this point right now, even though they said they'll be patient, I think Flyers fans are starting to lose their patience at this rate because, yeah, it's been the same team for the past 2 seasons. You're eventually going to have to start making moves because the center depth on this team is non-existent. You need more better talent surrounding Matvei Michkov. You need centers. You need better defensemen. You need better goaltending. You need a lot of things. And you got to get rid of some of these veterans that are on the roster that have been here for so long. You've had so many years and opportunities to trade Scott Laughton and you choose not to. Rasmus Ristolainen, he's coming up in trade talks a lot. You got to find a way to move him. Morgan Frost is coming up in trade talks. Joel Farabee coming up in trade talks. I believe those 3 guys were just put up on Frank Seravalli's top 50 trade target list, if I'm not mistaken. Joel Farabee, Morgan Frost, and Rasmus Ristolainen. So, Flyers fans are not going to be able to handle if this trade deadline is quiet again. And a lot of the things that are coming out in articles, it kind of just feels like it's the same stuff that has been being said interview after interview. And now, granted, yes, Danny Briere's not going to disclose everything that he's going to do. But right now, people are just going to take those quotes at face value because that's all you've been doing at this point. It's really been doing nothing. You've really been just staying pat. Kind of being afraid to make moves. I need to see a pulse. I need to see a course of action. Because would it benefit this team more to be in the bottom of the standings, to be able to draft top 6, top 7 in the draft, and maybe get some lottery luck? Yeah, that could be very beneficial to this team to get a high draft pick again. It would be very beneficial. But if you're stuck where you're in a position where you can't win in the draft lottery because you just missed the playoffs or blah, 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 you're in the middle of the first round once again, you need to find a way to make trades. You got to find a way to utilize these draft picks to get talent in return. A lot of people are talking about the Elias Pettersson rumors and all of that stuff. Would I love the Flyers to go after Elias Pettersson? Yes. Do I think they can get him? No. Because they don't have enough. That's just the face value there. But that's not my job to do it. That's just what I think. But it's Danny Briere, Keith Jones' job. They got to find a way to bring a pulse. They got to find a way to set course of action. They got to find a way to bring life to this team to where it can give fans the ability to believe in the next few years that this team could find a way to get out of purgatory, to find a way to get out of this stench, to where they could believe this team can actually compete with Matvei Michkov for years to come. And yes, this team is still years away. And we're not talking about making moves to clear things up in a year. You got to find a way to be aggressive at some points, though. You got to find a way to make rebuilds. You eventually make moves at some point. You just don't stand pat and let kids develop the entire time. That's not the case. That's not how it works. You got to make trades at some point. You got to make signings at some point. And right now, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Danny Briere for this deadline in this offseason. It's a big trade deadline and a big offseason for these guys. And if they don't do anything, a lot of people are going to lose their patience. I might be one of those guys that lose their patience. Because I'm giving them till this trade deadline, until this offseason, to give them the benefit of the doubt. Until then, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. And if they prove me wrong, well, then I won't be a happy camper. Just how it goes. So, we'll see how far this team goes right now with the way they're playing. Because if we look at their record right now, they are below 500. In terms of the division standings, they are the 3rd worst team in the Metropolitan Division. They're 17, 19, and 5. They got 39 points on the year. 2 teams that are behind the Flyers are the New York Rangers, who have completely fallen off of grace. They have 38 points. They're 18, 20, and 2. And granted, they have a game in hand on the Flyers, so the Flyers are technically a worse team. The New York Islanders, same thing. They're 2 points worse than the Flyers. They're 15, 18, and 7. And they also have a game in hand. So Flyers technically are a worse team, in my personal opinion. And the Flyers, where they're trailing at, they're 3 points behind Pittsburgh, 3 points behind Columbus, and then basically the rest of the Metropolitan Division is nowhere close. And if we look at the entire league standings where the Flyers fall in that perspective, the Chicago Blackhawks are obviously the worst team in the NHL. They're their own brand of bad. Then you got the San Jose Sharks, the Nashville Predators, the Buffalo Sabres, the Seattle Kraken, the Islanders, the Rangers, and the Flyers. So that'll be pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if the league were to end today, the Flyers would be drafting 8th in the draft lottery. And basically separating between 8th and 2 is a mere 7 points. Flyers are only 2 points ahead of Seattle. They're only 4 points ahead of Buffalo. They're 6 points ahead of Nashville, 7 points ahead of San Jose. No one's catching Chicago at this rate. So, like I said, they're their own brand of bad. But yeah, it would be very beneficial for the Flyers to maybe slip down the standings. I think it would. So, like I said, we'll see where this takes them. Schedule-wise, they have a lot of home games coming up. They play tomorrow against Dallas, and they're playing a lot of good teams upcoming too, so maybe that means a lot more losses. They play Dallas, that's a really good team. Anaheim, not a good team. Florida, really good team. Columbus, standings-wise, Columbus is better than the Flyers. Islanders, Devils, Detroit Rangers, Islanders, Devils, Islanders. So yeah, that's basically the rest of the month of January. Who knows? Who knows? Right now, they're not a pretty watch. Maybe that's a good thing. So, appreciate you guys for tuning in. I would like to hear your thoughts on the Flyers and how everything has been going in the past few weeks. So, don't forget to leave your comment in the comment section down below. Don't forget to drop a like. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It does me a great deal of service. You can also use the code TTPSPORTS. $20 off your first purchase at SEATGEEK. Great deal. Do not pass it up. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. We will get to an Eagles video in the next few days, trying to work through everything, trying to balance out scheduling now that I'm also editing for Rush Joy. So trying to work out just how to even everything out with him, Brodes, and all this stuff. So we'll figure it out over the next few days. It's a weekly progress here. So just wanted to give you guys that kind of a heads up as well. But we will get to an Eagles video in the next few days, talking about the upcoming playoff game with the Green Bay Packers, so definitely stay tuned for that. But for now, appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time.